So when Kavika asked me to do this, to be the keynote speaker at this conference, I was very, very intimidated. And I said, Kavika, I think you might need to think about other options. You might need to find someone who's more qualified. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, let's just talk. And as we spoke, I got more and more excited in telling him about some of the different research efforts that I had going on and some of the opportunities I had to incorporate my culture and my students and my heritage, my family, into my research. And through the course of that conversation, Kavika said, now I know we have the person we want. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I felt his love and his desire to ensure that this is a genuine effort that we can move forward together and do something meaningful for ourselves and for future generations. The next thing that happened is Kavika and I had a really hard time getting me to come up with a title, because I really was struggling with how to present my research, which is one of the things that I was asked to do, and also do that in a way that was inspiring and encouraging and could bring people forward. So I've carefully considered my comments today, and I hope that they will set the proper tone for our efforts throughout the day. I'm going to start out with just a little bit of introduction, mostly for your entertainment. So I spent much of my life in Orem, Utah, and much of it in Hawaii in 2 different places. I finished elementary school in Kailua at Keoni Elementary, and finished high school, as Kavika said, at Molokai High School. And this is me just after graduation from high school. My students tell me it looks like Drake, but I don't know. I don't know if I see it. And this is me as a freshman at BYU. And you can see that I was very careful to ensure that I followed the honor code. And my hair was off of my ears and off of my collar. So, and I had a good time. Some of you might recognize this guy right here. This is Kyle Reyes, faculty and administrator at UVU, and he's been a friend of mine and a role model of mine for many years. Spectacular guy. I don't know if he's going to be here today or not, but certainly someone who's unified with us in the effort that we're making. The next blast from the past that I want to show you is a short excerpt from my speech at my high school graduation. So there's a couple reasons I wanted to show this to you. First is it's fun to see what I looked like and sounded like 20 years ago. And it's also fun to see me trying the best I can to speak just great, proper English and being completely incapable of that. But that's okay. And let's make sure hopefully the sound is on. And that's the Grand Akana, if anybody knows the Akana family. Can you make it louder? I can't. You gotta go down there. I'm sorry you couldn't hear that well, but at least you were focused, trying to listen. So I said two things there that some that weren't as wise as I thought they were at the time, but others I said that we will succeed, and we are seniors and we're proud of our accomplishments. And I want to talk today about those two things in much the same way that I was trying to frame them 20 years ago, about success and pride, and how those things can influence the way that we move forward with our lives, and how they can lead to important impacts on other people. So that word success is a very complicated word. And there's a different definition, I think, for every single one of us. Right? If you sit down and you think, in your mind, you imagine wherever you're at right now, what does success mean to you? How would you define it? Right? That the answer to that question is and should be, as I mentioned in my speech as a high school student, different for every individual. We all have different paths. And the vision of success for Polynesians in general can be very, very broad. So I pulled a few pictures here that I think demonstrate some of that breadth. So often we think about success, and we think about people like Waniunga, who has recently seen great success, right? And found a place with the New York Giants, forced a fumble last week. He's doing great things, right? And it's exciting, and we all enjoy watching him, and it's really great. But there's also success that's defined in ways that are kind of compatible with the culture that we live in here, the broader culture that we live in here in Utah. And that would be things like Dr. Farah, who's a medical doctor in Samoa that works with me very closely, and she's a spectacular success, a leader in her country, a leader in pediatric medicine. But there's also measures of success that are as simple as staying on your homestead land on Molokai and sustaining your family by practicing agriculture and careful stewardship of the ocean. And I hope that every one of us understands that there are many, many ways to be successful. And I'm the keynote speaker today partially because of the research success that I've seen in Alzheimer's disease, and that's the success I chose for me as an individual in my career path. But it doesn't change or lessen any other definition of success. And I think that's extremely important for us to understand, given our culture and our heritage and the challenges that we face as we try to honor those and be successful in the variety of ways that we seek. So I hope that as we consider success in this summit, and if you look at the agenda, it's clear. There are many different fields and professions and foci today, and the reason is that success is about your individual desires and finding something that's fulfilling for you and blesses your family and your community. So with that being said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I have seen in my personal research efforts, and because that's one of the things that the organizers asked me to do, and talk to you a little bit about Alzheimer's disease. And I'm completely positive that many of you have a breadth of experience and maybe don't know a whole lot about biology, but I think we can get you to understanding what I'm doing and why pretty quickly. So I'm going to jump right into that. This is Alzheimer's disease. Right? Alzheimer's disease is the most common neurodegenerative disorder. And the number of cases is growing rapidly. Just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you know a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Okay, look around this room. More than half, right? Probably 3/4 of the people in this room have personal experience with this disease. That's why I'm studying it. I want to contribute to a solution. The disease is defined as, the pathological definition right here, a preponderance of amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles in the brain, leading to neurodegeneration, dementia, and death. There's no cure, there's no prevention. It's a terrifying disease. These plaques form in between the neurons inside of your brain. They're made up of a protein called amyloid beta 42, or A beta 42. The tangles form inside of your neurons. This kind of teardrop-shaped cell is a neuron. They form inside of your neurons. They kill the neurons, and their main component is a protein called tau. So again, this is the disease. We have to understand what causes those proteins to build up, how we can stop that, how we can clear it in order to prevent and stop the disease. And one of the best ways to understand those things is to learn about the genes and the proteins and the pathways in your body that influence those factors. As a geneticist, I approach that question using a variety of tools. The most straightforward tool, and one of the most common tools that I use in my lab and in my research that my students are working with, is a genetic association study. It's very, very simple, very straightforward. All we need is a clinical diagnosis or a trait, a phenotype is the word we use, and information about genetic variants or a genotype. So if we have whether someone's Alzheimer's disease or not, and some of their DNA, then we can conduct this association study. So the way we get diagnosis is through clinical diagnosis from a physician. And the physician goes through a psychiatric exam, generally a series of questions. There's a couple different versions of those. I'm going to give you a little glimpse of what the clinical dementia rating is. So this is a quick example. I'm not a doctor. If you don't do well at this, I'm not a medical doctor. If you don't do well on this test, I'm not diagnosing you with Alzheimer's disease. But I want you to play along with me here, okay? So repeat this phrase after me. John Brown, 42 Market Street, Chicago. Okay, so just remember that phrase. Okay. Now count backwards by threes from 71. You got to do it. You can't just laugh. You got to do it. Okay, stop. That's good. Spell university backwards. Got it? Okay. Now what was that phrase again? Okay. John Brown, 42 Market Street, Chicago. You guys all got it, right? So someone with Alzheimer's disease has impairment of their hippocampus, which controls their short-term memory, right? And other brain regions, but generally most of the damage starts in the hippocampus. So an individual with even mild dementia, mild Alzheimer's disease, after repeating the phrase and being distracted by those other tasks that require short-term memory, right? You can't spell university backwards without kind of envisioning the word and then picking the letters one by one, right? Counting backwards by three, you kind of have to think about what number you're on and where you need to go. You get distracted, and then when an Alzheimer's patient tries to recall that phrase, it's not there, or at least not in its entirety. So someone would be able to recall John Brown, Chicago, but not remember there was a street, and even with prompting, not be able to recover the rest of the phrase. And so that's just a simple example. There's a variety of ways that psychiatric exams can target particular memory function and diagnose somebody with Alzheimer's disease. All right, you could also have trouble remembering the phrase if you stayed up too late last night, or waking up to get here at 9 is a lot earlier than you're used to, right? Those kinds of things. But the exams are actually quite effective, and we get diagnosis that's about 95% accurate of someone that if they have Alzheimer's disease, that's what they were diagnosed as. So once we have that diagnosis, we then need genetic markers. And genetic markers we get from interrogating the genome, right? We actually look at DNA sequence. We find parts of the DNA that are variable between individuals, and we measure them. We know what base pairs an individual carries, and then we can compare the base pairs that are present in Alzheimer's cases versus the base pairs that are present in people that are the same age and the same gender, but cognitively normal. And that's a simple version of that is set up here, where we interrogated one part of the DNA. It could either have a circle or a triangle allele there present. And we took all of our Alzheimer's cases, and these are the alleles we found, and all of the controls, and these are the alleles we found. And you don't have to do the statistics, although I've got a link down here if you're interested in exploring that. You can look at this very easily and make a determination. If you got to choose which DNA you carried, circle or triangle, which would you rather have? Nobody, it's too easy to answer, so no one wants to answer. Circles. Why? Because your probability of being a member of cases would be higher if you had circles. So you don't want circles, right? Circles would influence you to be, you'd say are associated with Alzheimer's disease. Triangles, you'd say, are associated with not having Alzheimer's disease. That's all we're doing. Right? It's very, very simple. The challenge becomes there are 3 billion base pairs in the human genome. And in order to detect the kinds of genetic effects we want to see, we need to look at those base pairs in tens of thousands of individuals. And so it takes a lot of technical skill, a lot of careful study design to be able to take all of that information and extract real conclusions about what is causing Alzheimer's disease. So those of you that work with computers even daily can imagine what would happen if I gave you a file with 3 billion columns and 70,000 rows. Right? Your computer wouldn't do that. Right? You'd have to have some specialized skills and specialized ability to approach this. And so that's what my lab focuses on, is taking these types of genetic studies at very, very great scale and doing the data analysis. For many years, we've moved forward on this type of work, and we've had a lot of success. There were challenges. We didn't have enough samples. We didn't have enough genetic markers. And we've overcome those through advances in technology. We now can interrogate millions of genetic markers for just a few $100s per sample. And we finally got over the whole challenge of everybody wanting credit to be the one who found the next gene, to be the one who solved the disease. And we created massive international collaborations. And as we've put all of the data together, cooperated and worked together, we've had great success. The first time we did this was in 2010, and this one figure represents about 15 years of aggregate effort, millions and millions of dollars. And all it shows is for every genetic marker, the probability that that marker influences risk for Alzheimer's disease. And the higher the dot is, the more important that genetic marker is for disease. And if it's over that red line, then we consider it to be a meaningful risk factor for the disease. And so in 2009, we discovered the first 2 new genes for Alzheimer's disease in over 20 years. And this was a big deal that if you were into the Alzheimer's world, it was all over the place, even in general media. In the New York Times was writing articles about we finally have new genes for Alzheimer's disease. It's going to help us understand what to do next. Well, once we did this, the people who weren't involved in this initial collaboration said, hey, we want to play nicely with everybody now too, because we want to find genes too. And we ended up tripling the size of our collaboration and running another study where we identified 17 additional genetic risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. And this was in 2013. And so in just a short time, through collaboration, cooperation, and personal effort with technical skills, we took a disease that we knew nearly nothing about and added 20 new genes for the disease that opens up all kinds of information about, importantly, how the inflammatory pathways in your body and the immune system influence your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Perhaps our most interesting finding came from a new wave of technology with the ability to sequence the entire human genome. And we did this in a much smaller collaboration because very few labs have access to massive data sets that are required to do this type of work. And this work was headed up by myself, Andrew Singleton, John Hardy, and Allison Goat. And we took human whole genome sequence, 3 billion base pairs per sample, and we analyzed inflammatory markers based on the data the findings we had from these previous results. And we found rare genetic variation in a gene called TREM2, which is present on your cell membranes, and actually its job is to shut down inflammation. So everybody's sprained an ankle or a knee or something, or a wrist, and you know that it gets swollen and maybe some bruising, and you always want to keep the swelling down. But the reality is that inflammation is part of the natural healing process, and your body is designed to initially increase inflammation and then have it decrease over time as healing occurs. And this gene is important for inflammation in your brain. And if you have a malfunction, it actually turns off inflammation in your brain. So if you have a malfunctioning version of this gene, when your brain has amyloid plaques and tangles inside of it, you have a runaway inflammatory response that makes your disease much more severe and actually increases your risk for disease 5-fold. And we're already working with several companies who have taken this new gene and are developing brain-specific anti-inflammatory drugs that they believe will prevent Alzheimer's disease. So really exciting findings. I don't want to put us too far behind schedule, so I'm going to skip the really technical Alzheimer's stuff here and jump to the next stage. So I said success, and I gave you a few examples of some of the success that I've had in my research efforts due to a great team of people in my lab, great collaboration, and determination and effort on all of our parts. The next thing I want to talk about is pride, and pride is a topic that has very deep theological underpinnings. When people speak about that in the context of LDS religion or Christian religions or actually any world religion, pride is clearly something we need to avoid. And that kind of religious definition comes from, or is closely related to what I have here, a high or inordinate opinion of one's own dignity, importance, merit, or superiority, whether as cherished in the mind or displayed in bearing and conduct. In the words of C.S. Lewis, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. It's the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. Once the element of competition is gone, the pride is gone. In the context of our discussion today, I want to say when the bad type of pride, this theological definition of pride, is occurring when we view our own definition of success as the only correct one, and when we use that to judge others as inferior to ourselves. So if someone with a PhD and lots of publications and lots of research money decides that they're doing something better than someone who is sustaining themselves on their homestead land, that's wrong, and that's the kind of pride we have to strive to avoid. But in our society and culturally, there are other definitions of pride that are not related to the theological definition. And that relates to this second definition that I have here. Pleasure or satisfaction taken in something done or accomplished that reflects on oneself. This type of pride, right, leads to looking outward, realizing that cooperation leads to success that all can be proud of, and leads you to value your achievements and potential along with those of others around you. And that's the type of pride that I want us to strive to have today. And there's a reason for that. It's because when we take personal success, individual success, however we define it, and we excel, we give ourselves the capacity to serve others. And when we have the right type of pride in our hearts for our family, our community, our culture, then we give ourselves that desire to help others. And only with both of those things can we make a difference for ourselves and our community. I want to give a couple examples of this, and I'm probably going to go a tiny bit over time since we started a little late. When I started working at BYU, there's Wayne right there, and Manti. I immediately brought students into my lab and got them involved in research, and I was excited to do that. And we did some great things. So this is one of my favorite manuscripts I've ever published. It's not in a prestigious journal. It didn't change the world. But there's 3 Polynesian co-authors on this manuscript. And that was really exciting to me at that stage of my career. But as Wayne, who's here, can attest, I didn't have a whole lot more to give to my students. I could say, hey, come volunteer in my lab, do some research, it'll be fun, and we'll work hard, and I'll try to help you towards your academic goals. And I did, but I was limited. Those that are part of the BYU community might have noticed that there was a recent article that BYU published about some research efforts that we have going on in my lab now. And this is a little different, and Wayne might be a little bit jealous when he sees the details here, right? So we also have Brooke and Loki that are here with us today, and they're great models up there in the lab, in their lab coats and gloves. And because of the difference in my research program over the last 7 years, I had obtained National Institutes of Health funding, significant influence with the National Institutes of Health, significant visibility in my field and credibility in my field. I was able to help them apply for grants that are a subset of, that are related to my grant, and obtain $70,000 each towards their educational goals for graduation. Thank you. Now, BYU tells the story the way they need to tell it, and I understand that, but they missed out on this wonderful woman down here in the corner picture, right? And many of you might know Justina Tavana. She was an incredibly important part of making this happen. She initiated the grant process. She coordinated with National Institutes of Health and helped identify students that would be eligible and competitive for this proposal. She worked with them to develop their personal statements. She played a spectacular role in this, and she's the one that deserves some applause right now. You want to stand up and okay. So I know this can come off as me saying, hey, look at all this great stuff I did. What I want you to understand is that I'm showcasing this as a simple example of what we can achieve when we combine our personal success with a desire to serve the people around us. Right? That's the point here. The point isn't that the Kauwe lab is great. I want you to understand this is a simple example of something that's happened many times in the past, that's happening right now, and that we want to have happen more in the future. I want to highlight a few other examples of that I'm aware of, and this is by no means exhaustive, but I want you to know that there are a lot of people in our community that are working on similar types of things, or even better things, and understand what they are. So the Queen Center for Pacific Islander Health. President is Charles Ayu, Executive Director is Joyce Ayu, and based on my limited, I had the opportunity to work on their steering committee for a little while, and Joyce is the driving force here, and she's a spectacular woman, full of energy and desire to serve. In 2013, the Queen Center partnered with the Children's Service Society of Utah to address maternal and infant health among Pacific Islander populations. They started a pilot program that was supposed to target 15 women, but it was so productive that they ended up impacting 30 women directly, plus their families by extension. And the pilot led to the Community Health Services program hiring multiple full-time staff to maintain and continue this program, creating jobs for 3 Pacific Islander women and many opportunities to make a difference in the health of our community. Spectacular effort that is direct result of Charles and Joyce's personal success in their endeavors and their desire to serve and give back. The Mana Academy. Ana Pesi Kaili is the director and principal. There are many contributors to the board of this charter school that has seen great success and great growth. All of them, because of their personal success and their personal efforts, have been able to impact and make a meaningful difference in the lives of beloved members of their community. you can see that the mission of the Mana Academy Charter School is dedicated to excellence and committed to closing the opportunity gap by nurturing lifelong learners who are rooted in their native cultures and preparing them to be leaders of tomorrow. And if you go to their Facebook page, they have many, many pictures with captions talking about their efforts. Wonderful people from around the world, leaders from around the world who have come to that school to inspire those children and those teachers to do great things. Lots of simple things that we can do in different capacities. So many of you might know Fui Vakapuna. He's the assistant to the athletic director here at BYU. And as part of his employment efforts, he recognized the opportunity, given the resources and visibility, to invite BYU football players who didn't finish their degrees to come back to school and to provide them with some additional resources to complete their degrees. This is a picture of the first cohort of students that came back and finished their bachelor's degrees, opening up important opportunities for their lives after football and in addition to the things they've already accomplished. A spectacular thing, a little thing, just the opportunity to think about how can I use my personal success to change and bless the lives of the people around me and my community. I don't know if Jake has made it here yet. Did he get here yet? So, not yet, not coming. All right. So I do want to recognize Jake. Jake has done wonderful things. He's the chair of the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition Week that's kicking off next week, founder and director of the Samoan Integrated Language Initiative, and was recently appointed to the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Truly another example of using his personal success, his personal efforts, right, and finding ways to consider the people around him, consider his community, and provide for them. So I apologize, I've gone a little bit over time, but I want to thank each of you and commend each of you for attending today and participating today. I hope that you're inspired by the handful of examples that I've shared with you. I want you to know that this is not exhaustive, that many, many more of these things are happening. And I want you also to think about today's summit as an opportunity to share your experiences about the things that are happening and to plan new opportunities to serve and to share your personal success with the people around you. In closing, I leave you with just a simple directive. Komo mai ka mapuna hoe. Dip your paddle in. It's a simple saying, and you know what it means. Do your part. Do your part by seeking your own personal success. Do it humbly. Increase your capacity to serve yourself, your family, and your community. And then do it. Within your capacity, find the ways that you can give back. Find the ways that you can be an example. Learn to serve others and find a way to value their success as highly as you value your own. Thank you very much.